Welcome to the Beyond Membership Podcast, where we are uncovering what drives associations forward and how the suite of Momentive Software products accelerates that momentum. I'm Jake Juby, Director of Engineering for Nimble AMS.
And I'm Rob Miller. I am Senior Vice President of Association Strategy at Momentive.
We've got an awesome topic as it's the end of the year. A big topic right now is fundraising, in particular that end of year giving time period. We have a very knowledgeable individual with us today, and we're extremely excited to talk to him about the trends and themes in fundraising. So I'll turn it over to Steve Grinius to tell us a little bit about his background.
Hey, Rob and Jake, thanks for having me. Excited to talk to everybody today. As Jake mentioned, I'm Steve. I'm the Senior Vice President of Customer Success at Momentive. That's a new title. Up until about a month ago, I was the General Manager of our fundraising product, GiveSmart. Been in the space for 10 years in nonprofit fundraising. I'm the General Manager for the last 5. So, day in and day out, we're looking at trends and what nonprofits are doing or associations that are raising money for their foundations to drive donation, member, and donor engagement. It's been an ongoing passion of mine. I mean, we count down and see how much people are raising and kind of what's going on in the space. So it's an exciting time to talk to everybody. It's a big time of the year for fundraisers. We just came off of Giving Tuesday, which is sort of like, Cyber Monday for nonprofits. I know we're going to get into that a little bit. It's an interesting day, I think. It's a day that everyone participates in, but it's not the only day of the year that people fundraise. Most fundraising actually happens in the last couple weeks of the year. So, we've been talking to a lot of our customers lately to see how it's going, and we did a webinar a couple weeks ago actually about wrapping up 2024 and planning for 2025. So I think it's a really good time for us to get together and talk about this today.
Our team prepared quite a bit of data for us from the past month, and one of the things that stuck out to me was text to message, for example. I wasn't really surprised at the open rates, but it was quite a difference between that at 98% and email at 20%. And then also how much the peer-to-peer fundraising increases the participation in revenue per activity. I guess achieves something close to 12,500 campaign if you're using peer-to-peer fundraising. So how important is it to use some of these modern tools to have success in this competitive fundraising environment?
Yeah, Rob, I think mobile for sure is paramount. I mean, I think we all experience this in our everyday life for things other than fundraising. I don't know how many text messages I get from various stores I bought things from, but I always read them. And a lot of times they, quote unquote, get me, which is great. I think, there's obviously a difference between online commerce and online fundraising, but I think getting the attention of people is through SMS is something people are used to, and so it shouldn't be something that people shy away from. We've seen through 2024, 63% of our traffic comes direct from a mobile engagement, right? That's up 60% from last year.
So you mentioned that we had, a significant percentage coming in through mobile engagements. What other sort of themes did you see in 2024 as it compared to 2023?
Yeah, so it's not a new theme, but I think it's something that is becoming more and more important, more relevant for people. I think when you donate, whether it's to an association, foundation, kids' school, a local organization you support, a lot of times it was, hey, I'm at this event, or I saw something and I donated $50, $100, $500, whatever it is. But what people are really, nonprofits or people that are fundraising are really focused on is engagement, 1, but 2, providing information of the impact of the donation. That's a really, really big deal to folks. Like, hey, they don't just think, I'm going to help out this organization, here's my $100. They want to know, what's that $100 for? It buys 10 meals, it buys a bunch of blankets, it buys a bunch of books. What is the money that an organization is raising providing for people? Because that helps make a personal connection for a donor, which, Rob, you mentioned the peer-to-peer. There's a lot of ways that people can give outside of just money. And so I think what fundraisers are trying to do and what donors are really looking for is ways to engage with an organization beyond just a solicitation every quarter, let's say, right? So I think if you can make a connection with someone where you're telling them what their money is impacting, but also give them opportunities to volunteer, participate in a walk, run, whatever those things are. So that creates a more personal connection with an organization. The other thing that we're seeing is fundraisers taking a more community-based approach. So, people probably hear this all the time, like you want to go after something with like a shotgun approach or spray and pray. You want to be a little bit more targeted. And I think people are leveraging their local communities much more than they have before. We talked about this on a webinar a couple weeks ago. We were seeing that nonprofits are engaging influencers. And I kind of like laughed, and I wanted to make sure that I made it clear to the audience that like when we say influencer, it doesn't mean like some like movie star or superstar athlete, right? Anyone can be an influencer. I mean, Rob, you're an influencer in the association space, right? So, I think that's something that you have to think about, who's your organization impacting? Where are you located? Where are your, donors or members? Where are they most interested in? And then find people in that can influence in that space, right?
Right.
I use the example like, and I always like reference my little town I live in outside of Chicago, but it's like, the principal of an elementary school is an influencer, right? Like that person's not an influencer on TikTok with 8 billion views, but in the area that people care about,
They
that
have an
person's
influence.
But there's a lot of opportunity for that. We're seeing a lot of that more and more in the space.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I just wanted to kind of comment on some of that because I also see a very interesting parallel between influencers and actually membership-based organizations. If you follow kind of medium-sized influencers, they have what's known as a Patreon, right? And that's essentially them collecting membership dues and providing value to those members. And some of these are extremely powerful centers for raising money. I followed a particular influencer related to a hobby of mine, and they raised, in the month of December a few years ago, they raised $10 million for a children's charity.
Yeah.
They're quite a popular influencer, right? So they're able to have that outreach, but it's just incredible what that community they built can do for one particular cause.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, like for sure, like, again, your example is great. Someone raised $10 million. That's awesome. That's a big time influencer. But, based on where you are, based on your organization, maybe there's 5 people that can help you raise $5,000, and there's different scales for things. I think that's the other thing in terms of trends. As people are getting into fundraising or looking to see what they want to do in 2025, we talked a lot a couple of weeks ago with an audience about having realistic expectations and just doing something that like is achievable in a way that like advances your cause or what you're trying to do. I think it's unrealistic to think, oh, we're going to go find an influencer that's going to raise us $10 million. But if you're not engaged with the influencers today, maybe your goal is find 2, right? And set these realistic goals. I mean, we saw from a study that came from the Lilly School of Philanthropy in Indiana. That's my shameless plug for Indiana. We got a big game this week, so go Hoosiers. But they were talking about how giving in general is up like 3.6% or something, right? And I think that's not, that's probably something we'll continue to see. I don't think that's ever going to go from 3.6% to say 15% in 1 year. But if you are setting a realistic goal around what, here's what we did last year, or where we're starting from, it's a good place to benchmark in terms of what you're going to grow to. So that's something else we're seeing a lot of is people like taking a look at, how do they engage more? What are other campaigns they can do? What are things they can get started that they're not doing today to diversify their fundraising? Right. That's, people are in general, I think the amount of the donation dollar amounts are up a little bit year over year. In terms of the average gifts, donors are relatively flat, up a little bit in terms of people that are engaging. But I think what you will see is maybe a little bit more frequency because of the engagement that's going on. So I think that's definitely something that people need to consider. Recurring gifts, for example, just like in associations, you have membership dues that might be recurring. You can have donations that are recurring. And we've seen a huge increase in that sort of motion of fundraising, where that's up about 64, or if you have online giving, you can increase your fundraising sort of base upwards of 50%, right? Because you're giving people that option. So I think that's the other thing that's a big trend is flexibility. I was at an event recently and an organization actually encouraged folks to set up a recurring gift. And I think it's so that you don't forget about them. Right. And it makes it easier to spread out the payments, obviously, but really they would help the organization from a cash flow standpoint, but also I think was set up and purposely to maintain that engagement month over month.
So Steve, I'm kind of a data guy, and going back to the metrics, one of the things that jumped out at me was that participants who spoke out about a cause went up 17%, and perhaps that could be as a result of an election year we just went through. I'm kind of curious if you think that is what drove that, or if that's a trend that you see continuing.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe there's some impact, like, things get in the news and people get passionate about things in that time. But I also think, Rob, the social, everyone's social media is a big deal, right? And I think certain generations, millennials, Gen Z folks, like they like to, I'll say brag, but they like to show off what they're doing, right? So I think that is something that is a trend that will continue is people are proud of the organizations they support. They're proud of the volunteering they're doing. I'm going to assume most people are good spirited with that, or not just doing it for clicks or whatever. But I think that's something that is a trend that will continue. Will be, hey, I spent some time supporting this organization, or I just donated to XYZ organization and I made this impact. I see it on my Instagram feed. Like people will, support a cause. They'll put that link in their social media for their own sort of promotion of it. And so I think that's what we're seeing a little bit more of that, Rob, is people promoting it a lot more in terms of their giving or involvement with certain organizations on their social media.
Which probably drives in a lot of other people to follow suit with them, which would help drive that number up.
For sure. I mean, it's kind of crowd. I wouldn't call that necessarily crowd funding per se, but it's, a little herd mentality where it's like, oh,
Correct.
My friend Steve just donated to this. That seems like a really good cause. I'm going to donate to that too. And I think that's what builds a little bit of that momentum in terms of fundraising efforts and awareness too, right? Like if I see I don't call it an ad, but I see a post from an organization, that's coming from the organization. Obviously they're looking to raise money for themselves or promote what they're doing, which is awesome. But I think having that personal connection with someone promoting that organization has much more of an impact. And so I to your question, Rob, like that is something that will definitely continue. And I think it's something that organizations, whether it's an association or a nonprofit, will continue to sort of like encourage people to repost or share what you did, right? Like I made a donation. Do you want to share this with your followers? Make that easy from within a platform.
So we've talked about a few statistics. I mean, we saw 119% increase over last year's numbers. 14% increase in average gift size. We talked about the 63% of traffic coming through mobile, which is up from the 60% last year, not too much up, but we saw 79% of traffic coming from direct outreach, as you mentioned as well. Is there anything in particular that sticks out to you from 2024? Did you find that the fundraising growth for these organizations translated to GiveSmart as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen, increases in sort of participation. I think the thing that we're seeing a lot more is more consistency. And that is something that I would definitely say is a trend that's going to continue on, is like consistent engagement to drive more participation. I think the days of we have one big gala event in the spring and we'll talk to you next year are gone. People want to be more connected. I think that's what's driving a lot of it more than anything, Jake, is organizations, foundations taking a longer look at what they're doing for donor engagement or member engagement to be, more than just a one-time annual type feeling, because that puts a lot of things at risk. Like it's hard to say that like a donor gets value from an organization, but if they don't see that the money that they're contributing is creating good, and feeling that more regularly, they're likely to move on to another organization that catches their attention that day. So I think that's what's driving it more than anything, Jake, is organizations diversifying, for lack of a better term, their revenue stream in terms of the ways that they can raise money or engage their donors or members.
So I'd like to take this discussion just a little bit different direction. As you guys know, and probably most of our listeners know, is that we sell 4 AMS systems. We sell Nimble, Netform, Aptify, and your membership. And they all have a fundraising application as a module in that system. And I was looking at the data there, and those systems are, at least the customers who are running our cloud versions of that, raised around $780,000 this year compared to $25 million by GiveSmart, which is, of course, our purpose-built, what I'll call a purpose-built fundraising solution. And I'm kind of interested, and I think our clients would be really interested to know when it makes sense for them to think it's okay just to have a module for fundraising, or if they need to go to the next level and have something like GiftSmart. And I can think of some peer-to-peer capabilities, the text to give capabilities, auctions, selling tables and golf events. I mean, are these the things that are the clear differentiators, and what other things should they be thinking about, Steve?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Rob. I think I think as an association, it's how much, how serious, how engaged am I going to be with my members beyond just collecting membership dues, and am I providing things that are not necessarily, maybe it's not an educational workshop or things that associations do, but it's more of a social engagement type fundraising effort. Obviously, I'm totally biased, but like GiveSmart is built for fundraising, regardless of what kind of nonprofit organization you are. I know our AMS systems have some capability, but they're not built for it. Just like GiveSmart isn't built to collect membership dues necessarily, right? It's built for the fundraising or nonprofit side of things. And I think if seen associations that'll have they sponsor a run walk, or they'll invite their members to create a team in a run walk, right? That's a really big thing. Like, hey, our association is going to participate in this 5K next week, and how many people can help raise money for whatever cause they're supporting. I know that there's a ton. I mean, you guys probably know this, and again, I'd like to, if there's any out there they want to invite me, I'm sure Rob will come with me. I'm sure there's a ton of golf outings that associations have, right? So our software allows people to sell tickets or sponsorships to a golf outing, arrange tee times or arrange the tee groups, build all of this capability around the fundraising right into one platform. And I think that's something, Rob, that as I think about it from an association standpoint, even though they're the same people, there's different participation levels, and the difference between a member of your association versus a donor to your association or association's foundation. And I think if you have that distinction, that's where I would start looking at saying, hey, I need to have a system that's built for donors, even though they're the same people as my members. There's a whole different engagement set that goes on with that. And I think if you're taking a look and saying, hey, what can we do to improve, our engagement with our members, or improve the work that our foundation might do, or charities that we want to support. I think that's where that distinction comes in, is like, how much of this am I doing, and do I need to create a different experience for that person, right? You're sending a whole different set of tax receipts. People have a different expectation in terms of what they're going to get from the nonprofit they're supporting versus the association that they're a member of. And I think that's a big distinction. Again, if you're doing anything where you're participating in local events as an association, if you have a lot of times associations will have a gala or some kind of fundraising element as part of their national meeting. Anything that you're doing that's specifically around raising money for a cause that you're connected with, or a foundation arm of an association, I think that's where I would look at diversifying what you're using from a tool set there. Because again, certain tools are designed to manage associations, and others are designed to engage with donors and fundraising.
Yeah, those are really great responses. I totally agree with that. From a software development perspective, it's one of the great things about the Momentive suite, right? Is that you have the opportunity to go into and get really serious about fundraising. And from a statistic standpoint, or just a results standpoint, I can tell you that the customers that are on the AMS products exclusively are certainly not fundraising to the extent of the customers that are using GiftSmart, right? And the data is very, very clear that the successful fundraising companies are using GiftSmart, and by a significant margin as well. So if you're very serious about it, I think that's the line that ends up being drawn. You can of course, you can take donations with an AMS, but you're not going to be able to target that and really get the juice from the squeeze with fundraising with an AMS. And just like anything, right? Great results take time. Anything good doesn't come easy, and that's why GiftSmart exists, right? Because it really helps with that. It really helps you get to the good stuff with fundraising. So.
Yeah, Jake, I think if if you're going to say, hey, we're going to evaluate our fundraising strategy in 25 or in the future, and really segment that from the member experience to the donor experience, that's the time to sort of say, hey, do we have the right tool for that? To your point, I know that some of our AMS solutions will allow you to have a donate button on your website, right? But it's no different than the button they're clicking or paying through to go pay their member dues. And so, how can you segment people out, and again, same person, but there's a different expectation, different experience that you want to create between a member and a donor. And I think that's where you segment it out and get a little bit more functionality from a form that's actually designed to engage people, give that option of a monthly or quarterly payment, make a donation that contributes directly to, a certain aspect of what an association foundation might be raising money for. You have these different things that you can customize with the donation form versus just the button that goes to the same tool that we collect our membership dues from.
When I think about the two solutions, the AMS and a purpose-built fundraising solution like GiftSmart, is that, where the AMS is really strong is doing something such as engagement scoring, which will actually help you determine who are maybe the greatest candidates to do the donating, right? And then having a tool like GiftSmart allows you to do the types of things to kind of execute that strategy and get them to donate. Always my favorite is the peer-to-peer. Like when the things where I oftentimes give most often is when somebody's running a little campaign for something, they're going to go run or they're going to go walk or do something, and they have their own little homepage they've built, and they send that solicitation to me and my bunch of my friends, and you see them give and you feel like you need to do it. And that's where perhaps you can create that initial list with the AMS, then drive it to execution with GiftSmart, and then, really, as Jake said, really squeeze as much out of that as you can. So just stepping back a little bit then from the technology, Steve, what would you say associations should be doing to kind of shift their strategies in 2025 to maximize their efforts? Are there things that have changed that you would have said differently from a prior few years?
Yeah, I think kind of goes back to some of the things we were talking about at the beginning, which is creating a different experience for a member versus a donor, but also being able to segment your donors based on unique campaigns that are of interest to them. That is like the biggest thing that I think is, creating this more personalized approach to your member/donor base, right? Is not everyone's going to be interested in everything. So how can you segment people out based on amount they give, things they've participated in, involvement level, location? You want to take a look and create different donor experiences for different segments of your donor base. I think that's something that, again, like just in general, it's happening everywhere. It's not just unique to associations or nonprofits, but going back to social media, right? Like we all get different things in our feed based on what we're interested in. And those companies are really, really smart in how they target people. And not that everyone that's listening to this is going to be able to get to that level right away, but there's aspects of that I think that apply, which is, again, creating that personal connection and personal feel that you're targeting people with what they're interested in, right?
So basically profiling the base of donors and trying to segment them into different groupings that you can target more specifically, which is something that Donor CRM is going to help you with, right?
Yeah, I mean, or whether you're using a CRM, AMS, whatever it is, you could do it in a spreadsheet, right, if you have the data. I think that's the thing is, if you're saying where do you start, or, what ways to think about is like, just take a look at the data and how do you segment it, right? It's, what are the different bands you have? Who knows? Age, like I said, location. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. And I think that the important thing there is like, don't overdo it, right? There's a billion ways that you can slice and dice anything, but what's the most reasonable and achievable sort of outcome you can get fast just to get started, right? That's the biggest thing is taking a look at what are we doing today and where do we want to get to, but then what data we have available to sort of like segment things on.
So Steve, one of my favorite topics revolves around creating frictionless interactions with your members and your donors. How important is it from a perspective of having a successful fundraising campaign, just making it really easy for a donor to do business with an organization?
Yeah, I think obviously payments is a big thing. Do you have digital wallet options? We've seen a huge increase in digital wallet payments. If you already know who someone is, can you pre-populate some things on a form? I just think it's to your point, Rob. It's like, how do I sort of get in and get out from the actual transaction. I don't necessarily want to get in and get out from the impact or the communication necessarily in terms of what's going on or what am I doing to sort of like help this organization, help this cause, but make the transaction as easy as possible, right? Can you minimize the number of clicks? Do you need to have all this information because you already, especially from an association, you probably have a bunch of information already on your members. So you really need to collect their address, right? And the donation form. Can you have options around payment methods or periods, right? Frequency, right? Can you have those diversified sort of options for folks is important. So I think that's one of the biggest things from a frictionless standpoint is like make it easy. Again, like going back to the SMS example, like there is a way that you can send a text message with a link right to a form and probably make a donation in less than 10 seconds because you already have all your information saved on your phone, your Apple Wallet's already on your phone, and you can get in and get out. And then more important, but then I think it's you still want to hear what did that impact? How did that go? What's next for this organization? What are we trying to raise money for? What are we trying to support? Those are the things like you want to take some time to digest, but actually making the transaction, nothing makes me happier than when I'm buying something online. You think about when you go to Amazon and you hit that buy now button, you're in and out of there in less than 10 seconds.
So many organizations seem so worried about collecting all that info that you were discussing, when in fact, if they just took the name and the money, there's so many sources out there where you can find the information about this person separately and enrich your data later, but make the transaction as absolutely as easy as you can. As you said, send the text message, click to donate, and be done. I just have got to believe that would have a massive impact for organizations if they could just make it easier and not be quite so worried about finding out, what somebody's spouse's name is and things like that just really don't matter when you're trying to collect money.
You can always build a record over time, too.
Right? That's right.
Maybe today I got these certain pieces of information, but the next time I engage with you, I'm going to try to grab something else, right? I think that's something that people need to be conscious of being available is like, you don't just have one shot to engage with someone, right? You can collect and build a record over time. Obviously, a combination between various systems will allow you to do that. But to your point, Rob, like what's the minimum amount of information I need to sort of get this processed is important.
Even if you got to go to the darn dark web, somebody's got that information on us, right? Heck.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd do that, Rob, but I think if you have a bunch of member information in your AMS and I go to make a donation, you already know who I am. I think that's actually an advantage that associations have is they already have a lot of information on people. So you're not really looking for, I know associations are always looking for new members, but from a donor standpoint, that's something that nonprofits need to think about is like, how do I attract new donors? I think from an association standpoint, you have your sort of base, if you will, of your members as your base. So you don't need to go figure out who am I going to target, right? You already have the list. So you already have a lot of this information. You're just trying to basically evolve your members into donors versus attracting new people.
Yeah, it's a very interesting subject that we just sort of touched on in terms of data and like what is actually valuable when it comes to data. Because oftentimes, like, yes, the record is valuable, certainly in an industry like ours where very much the person matters as at the end of the day. But the value of data is actually in the experience that person is having. Kind of back to Steve's point about the recommendation engines that are out there in the social media world and how they're so good at targeting us. They actually are really good at that, not because they know who we are, but what we do.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're potentially looking at a particular thing for a certain amount of time, or we are clicking on something, and it's that experience that matters. They don't even know what our name is, right? We're just a hash in a database, but it's those experiences that let them model the overall general human being that they're trying to target and get us kind of do that predicting stuff that kind of creeps us all out a little bit.
Yeah, I think some of that too, Jake, is like aspirational. But it's like, what can you do? Again, we spent a lot of time talking about this with our nonprofit customers a couple weeks ago. Is like, what is one or two things that you want to do to evolve your strategy in 2025? Not just say, oh, we have to figure out how to target people on Instagram, right? Like, If you're not even an Instagram account yet, that's not going to help you. But if you need to take a step back and say, hey, let's take a look at our data and let's see what we could do, I think picking like one or two things is really important. Again, just to bring it back to reality of where can you go in 25 and what tools do you have and what information do you have just to make those decisions.
So, Steve, we talked about a lot of things that are working. Are there things that aren't working that people should either stop doing or change? Any of those things come to mind?
I mean, I'll go back to a little bit of the Giving Tuesday stories we were telling earlier. I think just relying on those singular days, singular events, it's not that they don't work, but they can't be the only thing. I think that is something that is I don't want to say it's not working, Rob. It's more like it can't be the only thing. So if you're used to just having our annual golf event every summer, and that's where we raise all of our money, I think that you're leaving money on the table in terms of the engagement you can get and the good you could do with the funds you raise, right?
Okay, so moving on to our segments. We have 2 customers to spotlight for you today. So to start, we have the Association of Fundraising Professionals, which is a Nimble AMS customer. And they're a fantastic resource for fundraising education. They do lots of webinars and events, and you can see all of those at afpglobal.org.
And one of the things that I noticed by going to that website is that they actually have 2 complimentary webinars coming up in January, one on the 22nd and one on the 29th. Unlocking Generosity is the first, and the rise of recurring giving and some 2025 strategies that probably will align quite closely for a lot of the things that Steve has been saying. The other thing that's interesting about AFP, being kind of the granddaddy of the fundraising world, that they support and sponsor 2 certifications, the Certified Fundraising Executive, and as every smart association does, that once they have success there, they come up with the advanced one. So they have the Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive as well. Great customer that we're very proud to have with us, and certainly a place to learn a lot more about the fundraising business.
Yeah, they do an awesome job. We actually are a big sponsor of their annual conference. Their customers are fundraisers, so I don't know if they do a lot of fundraising to sort of supersede their customers, but from a GiveSmart standpoint, we participate in a lot of their conferences. I know they do a ton of regional work, which is awesome. It's a really good resource probably for folks listening to this, like to just go learn about things happening in the fundraising world, right? To your point, Rob, like we talked about recurring giving and some of the stats around that. I mean, they have a whole program around that. We spent a couple of minutes on it. They have a whole program around how to take advantage of that in 2025 and beyond. So it's an awesome organization. And then I was going to spotlight, I know, again, being on the association podcast here, from a GiveSmart standpoint, we actually have a national customer of ours is the Coastal Conservation Association. They use our GiveSmart platform. 15 chapters are actively raising money. They average over $100,000 per chapter. One of the chapters, Louisiana, raises over $1 million a year. So it's pretty cool way. They do a really good job focusing on fundraising as an aspect of being a member of their association. A bunch of their campaigns are things like fishing derbies, sporting clay shootings. They do have some traditional galas, but I think that they do a lot of creative events to engage their members and raise money, right? Obviously, the nature of the association sort of leans to the outdoors a little bit, so that makes sense, but that's a really good example of how an association is sort of customize their fundraising to match what their members would be looking for to support, the foundation side. So the Coastal Conservation Association, I said they're great. I mean, I love seeing they use our platform to segment out selling tickets to these events or raising money specifically for the foundation versus just the membership dues. So I wanted to give them a shout out and highlight too here today.
Well, Steve, we need to try and get some invites to some of those events because they sound amazing.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Steve, for coming on the podcast and sharing all of the 2024 results for fundraising and all of the different strategies and insights that you have. They are very, very amazing, and I think our listeners will appreciate them very much, especially as they try to increase their fundraising capabilities. This has been the Beyond Membership Podcast. Thank you.